Andor has officially wrapped up with its second season, created by Tony Gilroy, starring Deigo Luna, Stellan Skarsgard, Genevieve O'Reily, and Alan Tudyk. This final season is about Andor continuing to embark on his path as a rebel hero, but things get more intense as the Empire's grip slowly presses further upon the galaxy. So we're going to talk about this season of Andor, and if you as a Christian should watch it right now. Hey friends, welcome to the channel. I'm your host Tim, and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. Andor is rated TV-14 for some intense sequences of violence and action, some intense and hard thematic elements, as well as some brief language. So we're going to go over any convictions you may have that may prevent you from watching this season of Andor, any theological themes that may be present within this season, and wrap it up with a personal review from yours truly. Without further ado, let's dive into the Christian Conviction Meter. If this is your first time here, the Christian Conviction Meter is a series of 5 convictions: violence and gore, lust, substances, profanity, and intense/horror scenes. These are all areas that may distract or hinder your relationship with Jesus, which we do not want you to do. So we developed this guide, tool, and resource to help you find good movies to watch. Without further ado, let's dive into our first category. We're starting off here with violence and gore, and this is a pretty violent show. I wouldn't say it leans very heavy into the TVMA side of things, but because of the fact that it's rated TV-14, it does up the intensity, especially for any other type of Star Wars project. The biggest thing to note here is it has a more gritty kind of violence tone, given a lot of different things that happen in this season. There's a lot of blaster fights, there is some hand-to-hand combat here, there is some stabbings, there is some shootings that take place within this season, and whether it is shooting to the head or just shooting just people in general. There also is, towards the later half of the season, a massacre that does take place within this show. It is inspired by some of the comic runs of some of this kind of time frame here, but that is a part of the season in particular. There is also a pretty crazy fight with some of the Imperial droids that do really just wipe the floor of just any enemy that stands in their way. It is pretty brutal at times, but not super duper brutal. I will say this as well, in terms of the kind of bloody nature of this show, the most we see is a bit of it splattered when someone gets hit on a console, and then when someone is stabbed and the knife is pulled out and there's blood residue left on the knife. That's as most bloody as it'll get. There is also a moment here where someone has lost their foot, but we don't see it being cut off in any way. That is not shown on screen, but we do see the foot kind of left over. It is pretty creepy, but it's shrouded in some shadows and darkness, so the extent of the injury isn't fully shown. It's just shown the shoe. That being said, due to all of these things, we're going to give this a 4 out of 5 in this category. Moving on to lust, and for the most part, we really don't have to worry about much here. Star Wars doesn't push the envelope with this sort of stuff, and the most we see here is some really passionate kissing that happens within this show, and it happens a few times throughout a few different episodes. There is something here that does kind of tie into this category, but mainly ties into the intense and horror scenes, mainly because of someone attempting to do something to someone in a more lustful way. I'll talk about that here in a second, because I know that is a very traumatic and potentially emotional area for some people. So I do want to preface that before we get to here. But for this category in particular, we're going to give this a 1 out of 5. Our next category is substances, and we have a bit here that lean toward the more harder substances. Starting off with our more alcoholic beverages, most of what we see is kind of in a party-esque scene of just people having some cocktails or stuff like that. Obviously, we don't know exactly what the drinks are because it is Star Wars, and Star Wars doesn't have Earth drinks. They have other things. And so we don't know to the full extent. There is also a moment here where a character of ours does chug down some of those beverages and then proceeds to dance like crazy in kind of a mental breakdown sort of state. On top of that, in terms of our more drug use here, the most we see is kind of a vial that has kind of like a droplets is probably the best way to put it, that you place on your tongue, and it just kind of helps you to sleep. But that is something that does take place because a certain character uses it to help them kind of sleep and be able to live kind of nightmare less because of just traumatic events that have occurred in their life. And so that is something to keep in mind here. Because of the nature of both of these sort of elements and just this area in general, we're going to give this a 3 out of 5 just to be on the more safe side. Our next topic is profanity, and for the most part, I didn't pick up too much on any sort of language, so I might have missed a few, and if I did and you picked up on it, please let me know down in the comments below. I certainly would appreciate it, but I didn't really pick up on much language here. I know hell is probably used at least once or twice throughout the show, and there might be some more kind of minor profanity contained within the series. Obviously, season 1, I think, had more language in it, but that is something to kind of keep in mind here. Just to be on the safe side, though, I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5, again, just to be a bit more cautious of this area in particular. And our last and final category is going to, of course, be intense/horror scenes. This is not a horror show, which means there are no horror scenes contained within this season of Andor. That being said, though, this is a very intense season. There is a lot of traumatic events that happen in this season, and this is going to be a pretty emotional area, so I'm going to try to take this as gracefully as I can. There is a lot of death in the series, and I would say there's about one every other episode, whether it's a character we know and love or it's characters that are off to the side. Like I mentioned at the beginning portion of this time together, I did mention that there is a massacre that does take place within the show. Now, it's not super gory in any way, shape, or form, but it is intense, it is drawn out, there's a lot of screams, it's a lot of chaos, kind of what you would expect in a way a thing like this to look like. There is kind of a intense scene of a Imperial droid just wiping out a lot of different people. It is pretty spooky, especially when they lift up a person, kind of use them as a body shield. That is something to be noted. On top of that, in a flashback sequence, there is a young girl who does witness a rifle execution. So a firing squad does take out several different people who are charged with treason, and a little girl watches on. I will say the shooting doesn't be shown on, or isn't really shown on screen, but we do know what is about to happen. We do hear the blasters go off, so that is something to note. This last category, I did talk about it a little bit in the lust category, and I do want to be very cautious. There is a scene here very early on, specifically in episode 3. It's not early on in episode 3, but it does take place within the 3rd episode of this season, where a man of the Empire tries to lustfully take advantage of another character in the series, and he does attempt to R-word her. I don't want to use the exact word because I know a lot of people, it can be a very sensitive topic and area, and of course YouTube with its algorithm, but this is definitely a very dark moment within the Star Wars universe. I will say this, I know it's a spoiler, but I know there may be some people who are worried that, oh my gosh, does this actually go through? No, it doesn't. The attempt is unsuccessful. There is a lot of fighting and a lot of just trying to get away. A lot of struggle, but the attempt does not go through, and so the R word is dropped within this episode too. It's a really heavy subject, and it even shocked me that Disney would even allow this, particularly in a Star Wars project. Obviously, Andor is more mature than any other Star Wars project we've ever gotten, but this is something that does take place within this season. That being said, though, this area, because of the all-encompassing nature of this show, we're going to give this a 4 out of 5 in this category. So on the conviction meter, it is going to be a 14 out of 25, a little over halfway, but as I like to say here on the channel, if this or any areas we talked about are a distraction or causes you to stumble in your walk with Jesus, don't worry about watching the show. This is a guide, a tool, a resource to help you find good movies and shows to watch. These are just things to keep in mind. But with that being said, let's dive into some theological themes that are present within Andor Season 2. And just like every Star Wars project, because it's set in a galaxy far, far away, there is nothing about Jesus, the Bible, Christianity, the church. None of that is contained within this show. And the most we see here is more talking about truth. There's a whole monologue that Mon Mothma delivers that talks about how one of the first things we lose is truth. Obviously, if you're a follower of Jesus, we know that the truth we are given is from the pages of Scripture, which are given to us by God through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, written by multitude of different authors. But again, nothing explicitly Christian about Andor Season 2. So with that wrapped up, let me talk about my thoughts on Andor Season 2. And this show continues to impress. I am just so surprised by just the writing of this show. It seems to have kind of a weird trend, even with last season, where it starts off pretty slow, but it ramps up just to absolutely insane levels towards the end of the season, and this one is no different. Although this season is very different because of the fact that it does have some time jumps. So every 3 episodes we jump forward a year, pretty much ending to about 15 minutes before we see Cassian Andor in Rogue One. And I have yet to see Rogue One since watching Andor. I've seen Rogue One plenty of times, but not since watching Andor. So I cannot wait to rewatch Rogue One with the lens of Andor. Curious to see how that's going to turn out. This show just is absolutely fantastic. The writing is just so good. It's so rich. And a lot of that comes from, I think, just the maturity of this part of Star Wars. And what comes along with that is seeing more of the darkness of the Empire, even amongst their own ranks, which is very intriguing and very interesting and something very shocking, but I really loved it. Obviously, there are some things here with the darkness of the Empire that may be uncomfortable for people to watch, such as what happens in episode 3, like we talked about. And even for me, the name drop, I was a little uncomfortable with, but I do recognize that that is the reason it was a part of this episode and a part of this show, was to recognize the uncomfortability of it, and also to say, hey, this is the Empire. It's not just about all these other things. There's also a subtle darkness to each of them. And so that is definitely something very interesting. But overall, just the way they capture some of these things, especially in episode 8, is absolutely insane, and it's amazingly done. Episode 8 of this show is, in my personal opinion, one of the best episodes of Star Wars television. But not just Star Wars television, I would argue, as of right now, it's one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen. It's that good, and the back half of the season is just really well done. The stakes are raised, they're higher, they're greater than ever before, but this show continues to deliver every time. And the cool thing is, this show may be called Andor, but it really is about the rebellion starting, although I do wish we got a little more of the building pieces, but that just is ultimately a nitpick on my part. At the same time, too, getting to see more characters take a grander stage, like Mon Mothma, and just what she's able to deliver is absolutely amazing, and she just delivers. Genevieve O'Reily did a phenomenal job with this character and just made it her own, right? From a character who had a little small part in Return of the Jedi to becoming one of the most influential pieces of the rebellion is just so cool, and it's so well done. Luthen Rael played by Stellan Skarsgard, absolutely fantastic. Stellan is a underrated actor in my opinion, and he just fits the Star Wars mold so well and captures just the tensions of building something like this very well. Love his character. And it's also great to see Krennic as well. Krennic being kind of a more masterful character, because we kind of see him in a more whiny sense in Rogue One, just because he has bullies above him kind of talking down to him like Tarkin and Vader. But then, of course, when he's down to the lower ranks, which we see here, he is very much that bully, intimidating presence. And it was just so cool to see just his character kind of have that kind of moment throughout the season. And again, I mean, it's just so good. There are a few things here I probably would have done just a little differently. I would have liked to see a few different time frames here, and like mainly just building the rebellion. Again, I think those would have been just really, really cool, but that's just a nitpick on my part. I thoroughly enjoyed this show. It's great seeing these characters. It's great seeing some characters we haven't seen in a while, like K2SO, my favorite of the Rogue One squad. It's just cool to dive into this era and see how the rebellion forms. And I can't wait to go back and rewatch Rogue One, rewatch A New Hope with this lens, and see how much it kind of changes, and just to see the sacrifice of how much people put their life on the line to make the galaxy a better place. It's just so well done. So overall, with the combined median score calculated by all the episodes of this season, Andor Season 2 is rated 8.8 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and as of right now, I would say it is the best season of TV in 2025. So it's 14 out of 25 on the conviction meter. It's a 8.8 out of 10 on our review scale. Those are my thoughts, so let me know yours down in the comments below. Let's chat all things about Andor Season 2 in the comments. And while you're down there, consider hitting the like and subscribing for us, joining our community here on YouTube. It just helps to send us out into the algorithm, allows us to reach more Christians to utilize their convictions so they can ultimately follow Jesus better. That's our ultimate goal here on the channel. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here. We truly appreciate it. But before you go, there are a few video recommendations over here YouTube is suggesting, one of which is the first season's review of Andor. Feel free to check us out and join us over there, and we'll see you all in the next one.